Yep. You should get it.
Did you already press the button?
Should press it.
Press the red.
There we go.
There you go.
Okay.
Okay, good evening. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Mashpee Conservation Commission. This is Thursday, November 12th, and I would first ask the members of the audience, do they have any new business or questions to bring up at this time? That not being the case, Drew, I'd turn to you for the pre-post hearing agendas.
Okay, the first item is the approval of minutes from September 10th, 2015. We do have a quorum of those present during that meeting.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes?
Yes?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Okay, so it passes. Go ahead, Drew.
The other two post-hearing agenda, pre-hearing agenda items involve some lengthy discussion, so I wouldn't want to get into those, but
Okay.
I can go to the updates on land stewardship
Good.
program. I have some slides. Caitlin will update you all on what's going on with the land stewards program.
Great.
Sure. So, as of right now, we are going to apply for a habitat management grant to do some prescribed burning up at a very rare habitat, a frost bottom habitat up near Lowell's Lane, excuse me.
Kate, you might want to move your microphone.
Oh, sure, yeah, sorry.
I'm
I was scared
Getting
of
the
it.
button here.
So the area does already have a plan set in place. It just wasn't able to be implemented before due to weather and other constraints. So we would utilize this grant money to do prescribed burning in the area, and it will help maintain this very rare habitat that creates its own microclimate, and other trees can't grow in it, so it keeps a lot of the woody herbaceous vegetation to keep blooming throughout the year, providing a lot of food for many different types of wildlife out there, and also will make the habitat better for our New England cottontails and box turtles and buckmouth species of concerns for us. So that is just to show you exactly on the map, that's where it is. And that, as you can see, the area, the unvegetated area is where we would be proposing the location.
Now, just for clarification, the town recently sent out telephone calls announcing a prescribed burn. Is that already funded, or how does that, is that part of this?
I can answer that.
Oh, yeah,
So in the Mashpee Pine Barrens, which is part of the refuge, it's our land, state land, tribal land. They've been going in and doing prescribed burning whenever the conditions are right to conduct that activity. And it's an ongoing, it's something the commission has reviewed in the past, but there's just long periods of delay because the weather conditions aren't right. So whenever they are, we get notified from, his name's Joel Carlson, he's the burn boss out there. Lets us know exactly what areas are being burned that have already received your review and your blessing. And then the fire chief, sets up the phone calls to let people know, just in case the wind changes and smoke starts blowing in a certain direction.
So those are already funded?
They're funded,
Previously
yeah.
funded.
The good thing about the town of Mashpee being a partner in the refuge system is that we get this kind of service, this prescribed burn and habitat management service, essentially for free from the federal government. And as you all recall, I mentioned a few times about this memorandum of agreement or understanding that all the partners sign every 5 years. So once that gets signed by Mashpee, it hasn't been signed yet, there's still a few details to work out. That will continue to have this kind of burn work continue on, essentially free of charge, because it's paid for by the federal government. I don't know, somewhere in the language you have to have an MOU, the federal government has to have an MOU established in order to continue to do prescribed burns on lands that they don't own that are part of the refuge. I don't know the details behind that, but that's just on the surface. This MOU is basically required to have all the partners sign into. And really, it's just an agreement to help each other out and share resources. It's non-binding, with the understanding that each partner can manage their lands as they see fit, but we can also take advantage of U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service prescribed burn activities free of charge. So,
Is this piece of property that you're going to burn, in this particular case, part of the wildlife refuge?
it is.
It
yeah,
is, okay.
yeah.
This
The
is, but this
two-
is our conservation land.
Yeah, the two parcels that you see within the circle to the right side, I can't quite make out their numbers, but
I think it was 147 and 125.
those are both owned by the town. The larger parcel on the left is Arenda Wildlife Trust. Collectively, we're all part of the refuge.
Is the road there 130
That's Lovell's Lane.
it's level lane?
Yeah,
Okay.
it comes off of 130 and then meets up with Quashnet Road. And then Quashnet connects back up with Great Neck Road
Okay.
North. So, yeah, so it's good, it's a good service to have. It's a forest community that depends on wildfire to reinvigorate itself, and so that's why you're seeing so much of this activity, is because we suppressed wildfires, obviously, for obvious reasons. But then it causes habitats like this to go stagnant and no longer be suitable for the species that have depended on them. They're called early successional habitat. And areas like this with a frost bottom habitat like that, where you see that clearing and there's no trees, that's due to microclimate conditions that actually prevent the growth of trees. So it's just dense underbrush, and that's the most favorable type of habitat for a variety of early successional species.
Okay.
So preserving that is of the utmost importance for those types of species, and because it is such a rare habitat, it makes the grant application that Caitlin's working on all that much more competitive, so.
So are you done?
Just one more quick slide, and additionally, we will be building and installing bat boxes. Recently, the prescribed burning out in the Pine Barrens, they had to do a survey prior to that of what bat species were out there, and we do have the federally endangered northern long-eared bat out there. So, and just in general too, it's just a great way for natural insect management, and of course the pollination services they provide as well. So it will just be able to enhance the habitat we have already for them. And just additionally, I added a calculator and carbon footprint to our stewardship page, just in general for the residents to use. And we already have AmeriCorps planned as well in the near future to help us maintain and clear some trails in some of our conservation areas, especially in the Mashpee River woodlands. And as of tomorrow, we're going to be fixing up our pollinator gardens for the upcoming spring as well. So we'll have the Friends of the Mashpee Wildlife Refuge come, as well as Senior Corps. So we're just kind of have quite a few things going on right now. Looking
Great.
forward to the rest of the year.
Well, it's 6 after 6. Should we go to the hearings, Drew?
Sure.
So I'll call the 6 o'clock RDA hearing. Roseanne Altschuler and Paolo Siconilfi, 98 Fells Pond Road, proposed removal of 2 trees to allow for replacement of existing timber retaining wall, with construction of a stone retaining wall.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. I'm Erica Borselli from Falmouth Engineering, representing the applicant, who is Distinctive Property Services. We are tonight proposing this plan here. The applicant is proposing to remove an existing timber landscape retaining wall and replace that with a new stone wall. The wall is just a little bit closer, I think it's about 10 feet closer to the top of the inland bank. And the reason the applicant would like to do this is the existing wall is in disrepair. This will also provide them a little more ease of parking in their driveway. They're gonna add a little bit to the driveway in this location. We have proposed the mitigation area planting of, I believe it's 545 square feet of mitigation planting for that increase in driveway and also for the removal of the 2 trees that are shown on the plan there that exist right in front of the wall currently. The plan also shows just the section drawing and the maximum height of the wall being 3 foot 6 inches. Any questions?
Looks like 3 to 6 feet.
Yeah, I think it's a misprint. It's 3 to, is it 3? Yeah, it looks like 3 to 6 feet maximum height.
Yeah, it is. It's a typo. It's actually 3 foot.
Yeah, if it's 6.
Yeah, that's why we had crossed it out here, just to clarify that.
Some comments?
One understand is the resource areas are all shown on the plan. You can see the flood zone associated with Fells Pond or Jim Pond. Inland Bank is another resource area that's also delineated on the plan. So this is in the 50-foot, outside the 50-foot buffer zone to the inland bank. I believe it's also 50 foot. But it's a minor encroachment to accommodate a larger driveway area. So in speaking with Falmouth Engineering, I said that it would, because of a loss of 2 trees for a non-hazard reason for expanding the driveway, there should be mitigation. And so they're proposing to beef up the buffer zone to the pond and inland bank, where you see it highlighted on the plan. And you can see the vegetation that they're proposing, the square footage, size of plants, spacing, and some wording on it being watered and maintained to ensure survivability, which those can be put in, that can be conditioned into the permit. It's an RDA, but you can still condition RDAs. But the reason I had it as an RDA is because it is outside the 50-foot buffer and it's a minor encroachment. So from the performance standards perspective, there's no impact to inland bank, there's no impact to Fells Pond. The only real impact is a minor impact loss of wildlife habitat by the removal of 2 trees, both of which really probably should be removed even if there wasn't a driveway expansion. You can see in the picture one of the trees on the right image is enveloped in ivy. So it's probably a hazard situation already, but this is just another picture standing in the backyard on the left photo looking at the existing retaining wall where you can see the 2 trees highlighted to be removed, and then turning around facing towards the pond where the mitigation area is going, which is a good choice because there's really no underbrush there at all. It's just spaced out trees with no real underbrush, so it's a good area for expanding that buffer strip. So I recommend a negative determination.
Any questions or comments from the commission?
I have a question. Doing a creosote wall,
Yes.
is there also a stone wall going there, or that's just gonna be gone?
The stone wall is, no, that
It's
will
just
just be
where
gone.
it's shown to be,
Yeah, that
okay.
will just be gone.
And so what happens to what's behind the existing wall?
So they're gonna increase the driveway just a little bit and add a little bit of fill in there to increase it, and then the stone wall will go, it will still be a retaining wall to go against that area.
Oh, I see.
Any other comments? Any questions from the audience? Do I have a motion?
I would move for a negative determination in regards to the application of Roseanne Altschula and Paulo Secanofi at 98 Fells Pond Road.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, it's unanimous. So I would now call the 603 RDA hearing, Sean B. and Catherine M. Burke, 58 Monomoskoye Road West, proposed landscape and hardscape improvements.
Good evening. My name is Kurt McDonald. I represent Clover Landscape on behalf of the Burkes. What we're asking for this evening is to do some landscape improvements to the front yard, side yard of the property, to include a boulder riprap wall a crushed stone driveway, cobblestone border, cobblestone apron, and any overseeding that we may need to do to put the yard back together once that's completed.
Is that it?
About it.
Drew, do you have any?
So,
Where's this property?
sorry, did you have a question?
There's no indication of where the property is, it's just,
Right, yeah, I'm sorry. It's in the flood zone. You can see from, this is the GIS map. There's the highlighted property. It's outside of 100 feet from any wetland edge, so it's strictly just,
Flood
I don't
zone.
even think the whole lot is in the flood zone, actually. I think it's a portion of the lot. Yeah, a quarter of it. So a lot of this work is in the buffer zone to flood zone, hence it's why it's an RDA. But it's basic, just cosmetic improvements through landscaping and hardscaping around the property. You can see from the photos here, this is the existing conditions. Not much going on the lot, just some sporadic plantings that were, I think there was a landscape scheme started and it just never was kept up or followed up on. Again, just some more photos around the house, so you can see what the condition of the property is. It's not naturally vegetated. It's been in this state for quite some time, even before that house was constructed, when the previous home was there. So the only condition that I would recommend putting into this permit is the lawn standards, which is already denoted on the plan to be reseeded with a drought-tolerant fescue mix, that it adhere to the commission's lawn standards if they are to reseed. Other than that, again, most of the lot is outside of the flood zone. We don't have any performance standards for the buffer zone to flood zone, but we do within the flood zone. And the property lies probably, I want to say, about 150 to 160 feet away from any wetland. So probably improvements, really, some of the hardscaping improvements with the retaining wall, because right now there's nothing to stop runoff onto the property. It's fronted by a dirt road, and then below the dirt road is the salt marsh and bordering vegetated wetlands. So I think the improvements will probably actually help to contain sediment on the site. So I would recommend a negative determination.
Any comments, questions from the audience? From the commission?
So, if I understand this correctly, you wish to have just a note regarding our standards added prior to issue of
Yes.
as a condition. Yeah.
Any other comments, questions?
I would move for a negative determination in regards to the application of Sean and Catherine Burke at 58 Monomoskoye Road, West.
All in favor, second?
Second?
All in
Yes.
favor? Yes?
Yes.
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 Thank you, it's unanimous.
Thank you.
Next is the 606 RDA hearing, A. Westerling Investments LLC, 688 Great Neck Road South, proposed installation of privacy fence and plantings.
Hello, everybody. Austin Westerling. I'm the, I guess, relatively new owner of 688 Great Neck Road South. Basically, I'm proposing a privacy fence, 6 feet high with 1 foot of lattice. And then secondarily, a few plantings, including 4 evergreens and future shrubs in front of the fence. Really 2 objectives. One is safety of my kids. 2 4- and 6-year-olds that are very active. And secondarily, just extreme road noise coming from the Great Neck Road South. Cars flying by at 60, 70 miles an hour. Basically, it's a fence solely on the, excuse me, the front of the property, covering about 25% of the surface area of the property. So for those 2 purposes, that's the excuse me.
Any comments or questions from the audience? From the commission?
Question, where would it be in regards to the lawn that abuts Great Neck Road South?
So I've had the property staked. for the exact boundaries, and it would go along, can't really tell, but the bed line right there, which is way in
No,
front of where
it's in front of the large evergreens that have been planted.
In front, but
In
yeah,
front.
right on the bed line. And I would have further evergreens planted behind it, as well as shrubs in front of it, but not where the, where the, the town owns the actual,
The road layout.
the road property, excuse me.
Right.
I did mention to the applicant about the 6-inch clearing underneath the fence, but that's really for projects where fencing is providing a total enclosure, because it's really in the interest of wildlife passage. That's not really an issue here. It's only a fronting fence, so I don't think that requirement is necessary. And particularly if he's trying to block road noise, it'd be good to have it flush to the ground.
And 2 4 and 6-year-olds,
Scurrying
actively
underneath.
trying to get underneath.
Wildlife, right? Yeah.
The one thing that you might want to talk to the people who select the species that you use is that area, I would imagine, that proximity to the road is going to get salt overspray.
Yeah.
And you may be disappointed, depending upon the species that they pick out for planting.
So it's a vinyl fence.
Okay, but you also mentioned you're going to put some plantings in
Oh,
front
right,
of the
right.
fence.
Yeah.
And those,
Yeah, out on the limb, landscaping.
yeah, well, fine, they should know what to put in.
Okay, anything else? Do I have a motion?
Sure, I'll move to, for negative determination in regards to the application of A. Westerling Investments LLC.
We have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Yes?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
It's unanimous, thank you. Next is the 609 hearing, William E. Baker, 100 Wheeler Road and 96 Wheeler Road. Proposed removal of hazardous trees. Owner of record of 96 Wheeler Road is John R. Baker. This was continued from 10/22/2015, and this is an RDA. State your name and address.
James Conlon, from Conlon Tree and Landscaping Services, and representing Mr. Baker.
Could you give us the highlights of what you propose?
Just a brief overview of what the applicant's requesting.
I believe the west side of the property, Mr. Baker would like to remove a 25 to 30-foot dead pine tree, basically a stub, the top of it's missing. It's right next to the shed dwelling. Just before that is a small oak about 25 feet tall. It's leaning over the driveway and the wires. It's rotten at the base. On the pond view side, he would like to clear out about 8 to 10 5-foot and under branches that are right in the view itself, and then 6 to 8 18-inch suckers that are on the tree. For the view, excuse me, I'm sorry. And then on the right side of the property, about 15 feet from the house, is another dead pine tree, rather large one, about 35, 40 feet, probably about 2 foot in circumference. It's hazardous to the house. And then there's 2 pines about 60 feet tall each, leaning towards the house, that are rotten at the base. They're still alive, but they're slowly dying. And they're leaning right at the house. And one broken branch that's in a maple tree. That's right
So Drew,
between
I'm
the trees.
having a little hard time
Sure.
figuring that out on this plan here. Can you,
One thing I would say that the sucker growth and branches to be requested for a view. I did explain to the homeowner that's an entirely different permitting process. It's not part of
Sure.
what's before the commission tonight. So we'll leave that off the table for now, and if he wants to come back for a distant pruning permit, he
No
can.
problem.
well, so that he understands that he's not, that work is not to be done without a separate permit, right?
Exactly. And I can reiterate that to the applicant. He may have misunderstood me on site when I was describing the difference between hazardous trees and pruning for a view. It's 2 separate permitting processes. They could be combined into one, but it's a notice of intent, different permit.
Hey, give me 1 second, please. Did he also ask you about the branches overflowing his house? Take a look at?
Yes, yeah, there are some branches that are going over the house, which is common maintenance pruning, what we refer to as maintenance pruning, to get the debris from falling on the roof, to cut back some of those branches. But it's kind of hard to see these photos because of the light. If I could just dim the light for a moment, and you'll be able to see much better
Yep.
Sure.
what's being proposed. So, looking at the plan at 5717, the lot, I think that's 100. So, you see the highlighted shed, the photo on the left shows the dead snapped pitch pine next to the shed on the left photo.
Yep.
That's obviously needs to come down. On the right photo, there's another, that's on the right side of the home, that pitch pine there. Another one that's turned into almost like a snag, but it's still tall enough that if it came down, it would land right on the deck. Photo on the left, again, going back to the shed driveway area, you can see that highlighted on the plan, again, on 5717. And then the photo on the right shows two marked trees that he's got on the, I guess it's just considered the undeveloped lot that's
Yes.
next to his lot.
That's number 100.
Um, What's your assessment of those trees?
There's
Can you
two
just?
pine trees, like I said, they're
Okay.
leaning towards the house, and right at the base, they're rotten. They definitely have carpenter ants in them. They're slowly dying, and the lean is just, I mean, it's right there.
Top
It's
heavy,
just a matter
leaning
of time
towards-
before they become uprooted or.
So in your professional opinion, they should be removed?
Absolutely, yes.
Because I know he had discussed with me that there was gonna be a shed there eventually, and he was worried about the trees, but I know that they're tall enough that they are leaning towards the house as well. Are those the only, he's got other trees marked on the plan. This is, you can see the plan that we have, or the commissioners have in front of them. Those are the two trees that we see in the right photo. These ones, over here, he's got identified, and I think the commission just needs to be clarified with those part of your,
There was
requested.
a maple that's marked, and that's one that has the broken branch in it.
Okay.
From my understanding, now, he called me to come in here, so this is real quick. on
Sure,
myself,
sure.
too. He told me that that's not coming down, it can't come down at this point in time.
That's what I explained to him, yeah.
I think there might be one other dead tree that's in that area, that might be the second one I didn't address. And
Okay.
I can't recall. It's
Okay.
so hard to look it up.
I think we'll leave it off the table again, and I can
It's not
readdress it
really
with,
endangered.
right.
No.
okay. So, I think that, I mean, his opinion on the two trees that you see on the right photo, which is on 5718, the lot to the north, I would agree with that assessment, that they should be removed, because they are tall enough that if they were to fall and they are leaning towards the house, they would do damage to the house. The other trees that I talked with the homeowner about were kind of, the branch on the maple, I think that's fine. But the other trees that he identified, I think were in the interest that he was gonna have a shed there eventually, and he was worried about those trees. But there's no application for a shed right now, so I think those can be, you know, left for further consideration, but not for this meeting. So just to kind of re-clarify and go over everything, the trees that you see marked on the plan on 5717, I think that they should be removed, as that's 3 trees total, 1 bordering the house, 2 on either side of the shed or driveway. And then the 2 trees that you see in the right-hand photo should also be removed. As far as the other 3 that are shown on the plan, I think those should be left off. And I can tell the homeowner, I can relay that information to him.
Sure.
You've heard it here at the meeting, so you understand which ones are to be removed and which ones aren't. And we can schedule a site visit as well with the homeowners to make sure that those are the trees. We can have them reflagged, just for absolute clarity that those are the trees to be removed. So if that's okay with the commission, that approach, then I would recommend a negative determination.
Any questions, comments from the commission?
I have a question. Drew, some time ago, I guess prior to your position here, I think the assistant conservation agent wrote a praising memo on the niceness of snags as
Yes,
a wildlife habitat,
right.
and strongly at the time encouraged them to be left up, not taken down, as long as they weren't hazardous.
Right, right.
Where do these fit in that category?
They're in the hazardous category. They're rather tall. I think they snapped at a higher up level than
And they're
a
close enough to
typical-
the house that,
And they're close enough to the house that normally and I agree with that snags are very important and they should be left if it's feasible, but these are just too close to structures
thank you.
to leave them, sure, yeah.
I think the previous pictures that you showed this, how high that snag is.
Yeah, you can see
It's way
it's
up
pretty,
above
it's
that.
pretty far up there. And the
Yeah.
other one, you can't see the top of it, but it's even taller than that one next to the shed, so.
Any
Sooner they
comments
come
from the audience? From the commission?
I would move for a negative determination in regards to the application of William Baker at 100 Wheeler Road and 96 Wheeler Road.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes?
Yes?
Yes.
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 Thank you.
Thank you, have a great evening.
If you can have the homeowner just call my office, just tell him to get in touch with me and we'll just go over what was agreed upon here.
All right,
Thank you.
have a great night.
I'd like to now call the 612 NOI hearing, Gary M. Locarno, trustee, 51 Waterline South Drive, proposed addition of another pile and float to existing licensed structure, along with relocation of existing pile. Again, this is an NOI.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Matt Costa, Chief Economic Engineer, representing the applicant. Commission may remember this property. It was before the board not too long ago for a addition to a deck, a screen porch area. And with that application, we were also correcting some violations that had to do with some illegal clearing. So there is open order conditions on the project right now. The work is underway. The work has begun for the replanting of those previously cut areas. I have discussed this with Drew ahead of time, and the applicant understands the situation and is agreeable to a condition that no work, or if this proposal is approved, that no work be allowed until certificate of compliances are completed on the previous applications. And just to give you some background briefly, the alteration to this pier that we're proposing, it's an existing licensed Chapter 91 licensed pier. The alterations required us to go for a new Chapter 91 license. This is a very long process. So in order to actually get that license, the time required to get the license to actually begin work is going to be about 9 months from the time that we receive conservation approval. So it's in the applicant's best interest to proceed in this manner and not wait for the other work to be done just because of this long process it takes to go through DEP. So I just wanted to give you a little background on our logic and why we're proposing this so quickly after a recent notice of intent. With that being said, our proposal for this project is relatively straightforward. We're looking to add on to the existing float and another float, exactly like the existing one, in another pile. What we're going to do is if you look at the plan, we're very close to our neighboring pier. This is a very unique shoreline that we have here, so there's really tight quarters. So what we're going to do is we're going to relocate one of the existing piles so that we can rotate the float, the existing float and the proposed float. We want to rotate those to the north to create greater distance between our butter to the south. So to summarize, what we're looking to do is to relocate an existing pile, to add a new pile in, and to add another float similar to what exists now to the end of the existing float. The work that is proposed is all within land under the ocean, and it only includes those two pilings, and it only includes the disturbance associated with that. The float is a pre-manufactured structure that would be built off-site and float into this site and connected. So there would be no construction that would be actually done on the site. As I mentioned, we would have to go through Chapter 91 process after they're receiving the board's approval. So there will be a long time period there to bring the other projects to completion and secure certificate of compliances on those.
So you're proposing that the work on the existing conditions, order of conditions, continue? It's apparently, you said it had started already
Yes,
and was underway.
yes, this,
You're gonna finish that, but you're not gonna wait to finish it to start the work on the proposed NOI here,
we're gonna start the permitting for it, not the work.
for
We will not
the
start
Chapter 91 permitting.
Chapter 91 permitting. We're not gonna do any work on this pier until we close out and bring the other open order of conditions. We get certificate of compliances for them. We bring the site into compliance.
And there's a condition in those order of conditions that states that,
Yeah.
that this, any further permitted projects, approved projects can't begin until that's wrapped up by a COC.
Cool.
Through a certificate
That's
of
good.
compliance inspection.
So to summarize, no more new work until we bring the site into compliance. We just want to get our approval so we can continue a Chapter 91 license.
Makes sense.
And Drew, there's a letter in the package here, November 12th, from the Marine Fisheries.
Yeah, so Matt, did you receive this letter from Division of Marine Fisheries?
Yes.
Their concerns are over the size of the float. Rick York also has concerns over the size of the float. Can you provide some
I did not hear any feedback from that.
No, it was just today. Sorry, let me do the Marine Fisheries first, and I'll go into Rick's comments. But Marine Fisheries basically says allowing additional float in this extremely shallow area along with associated boat use could have adverse impact on benthic habitat and this embayment, as it is categorized by Marine Fisheries as quahog habitat. Rick doesn't share the opinion that it's land containing shellfish, as it's mostly a mucky substrate in that area, and I would tend to agree with that.
The
But,
Division of Marine Fisheries says it was near land.
yeah. Project site, yeah, it says, yes. The project site lies adjacent to mapped shellfish habitat for quahog. Rick's comments said the piling and float additions proposed by Locarno Trust and Great River, 51 Waterline Drive, would not be a problem for shellfish. However, the area is shallow, limiting the draft of vessels docked there. So I guess if there's any clarification you can lend to the necessity for such a large float.
Well, the reason is to actually get more depth, and you'll look on the plan, there's a couple of spot shots, that's the negative numbers.
Yep.
Those are depths below mean well water. So this is a really easy way to move the boat out into deeper water with minimal disturbance. And I did look into performance standards on this, looking for size limitations on floats, and I did not see any, except for DEP's Chapter 91, which the threshold's like 5,000 square feet until you kicked into another marina category.
I guess my question would be, and you're right, there's no specific square footage for floats in the regulation, but what happened there, we used to have 150 square feet. And then it was changed to a consensus amongst the commission, the harbor master, and the shellfish warden, when they see a plan, to communicate with each other about the acceptability of the float size that's been proposed. So that's the current way to authorize a proposed float size, is just a consensus between the three entities. I guess my question is, and I understand getting out into deeper water, but why not a ramp instead of an additional float?
That's a fine question. It's because the applicant wants the float. He thinks that that is the easiest way to do it.
Are we expecting a
I
rather
made,
large
the
vessel to be docked at this?
Nothing that would, he has a single boat there, and we're not looking to add boats. So we would be fine with a condition for the single vessel. This is what my client was looking for. I made suggestions on changing out the ramp, and then relocating the float. We've done that in the past, and they seem to like the style of the wooden pier, the style of the wooden ramp, the looks of the structure. You can only go so far with a wooden ramp. You have to switch to aluminum. After this size, I think we're somewhere in the 14-foot neighborhood. So that would change the looks and aesthetics values of the structure. I think if we simply were to perhaps condition it for a single vessel, and could even further condition that docking of the vessels be done on the more seaward flow, I think that would be something that they would be agreeable to.
So you know the comments from, you heard the comments from Marine Fisheries and the Shellfish Constable. Shellfish Constable doesn't consider this area to be viable shellfish habitat, and Marine Fisheries identifies areas adjacent to this as quahog habitat. So I think between those two opinions, it's not land containing shellfish in the immediate area of this float. Shellfish warden's primary concern is prop dredging, because it's, even with getting out here, it's still fairly shallow water. So it can be conditioned. I typically add a condition into every dock and pier application that's been approved through an order, add a condition that at no time shall prop dredging take place, and that dictates the size of the boat and the depth of the propeller. So it can be conditioned, but it's your call.
Now,
I just have a couple comments. Often we get these things and never do the plans fulfill all our requirements on plans. Specifically, we require, or in the notice of intent, we require a verbal written description of what you're going to do with the floats off-season. We require a description of the boat or boats that are going to be there, the depth from the bottom of the boat to the water, to the substrate at low tide. And that's all well spelled out in our regulations, and it's sort of disappointing that we never seem to get that. We still don't get it with our new dock regs.
Well, my firm does an awful lot of docks in this town, and we write very detailed narratives, and we go through the regulations carefully. And this is the first time that I've heard of lacking information. So
Well,
I would be happy to look at that and add any information that the board felt was needed.
The thing that's problematical about it is at 2.5 feet of water, it's hard to imagine any boat that could get in there
So
and
we
not
do it now.
give problems to the bottom. And you know what happens, although we have no regs to deal with it, the guy gets out there and revs up his engine and scours out an area so his boat's nice and clear.
Guys will only do that if they have inboard engines. You do that with an outboard engine, you're gonna have a very expensive day.
I've seen it done with outboards.
Stainless steel
You
products.
gotta get away from the docks, even though the motor's up. Most of the time, when you're getting ready to leave, you drop the motor in at least a little bit so you can somehow sneak out without getting too close to the bottom.
It is shallow now, and again, that's the reason for what we're doing, and again, we would be agreeable to the
Sure,
condition.
get a few more inches is nice to have.
Yeah, I think that because I'm looking at Reg 27 right now, and what you're referencing, I believe, is probably the order of conditions that are standard to docks and piers, where there are conditions that state that the applicant must submit a plan of float removal to ensure that it's not going to be stored up on a salt marsh or bordering vegetated wetland. Most of these docks are taken care of by marine contractors. They get towed out to a landing and they get stored somewhere.
And if I
Off-site.
may, all of my standard notes for piers, that is in there, is that
Right.
it says upland storage of
Right.
off-season floats. It's our standard notes for piers.
So it doesn't specifically say that in Reg 27, but it is a standard condition for docks and piers to make it known what is the methodology of float removal seasonally. Some floats stay in the water with a bubbler, So they don't, it's not mandatory that they get removed. It's highly recommended if you don't have a bubbler, but it's not mandatory. And as far as prop dredging, that's another condition that can easily be added, as I mentioned earlier, due to the Shellfish Constable's concerns. I like Matt's suggestion about restricting boats docked to the outermost float and not the inner float.
Put it on the ebb side.
I think that could help to alleviate
Yeah, put it on the
concerns.
southerly side or
on
the
right,
ebb side.
Right, so that can be conditioned as well.
And on the seaward side, or,
Yeah,
Seaward side, yeah.
the ebb side or the southerly side of
they'll
it.
probably want to do that anyway.
Right, yeah,
I would
exactly.
think so.
With the boat
I
elsewhere.
would hope so, yeah, yeah.
But the other condition with the plan, I don't see water depth specified. Where, sorry. Looked at that 10 times, missed it.
Our regs say within a 100-foot circle of the property of the pier, we're supposed to have water depths.
That's true,
Okay.
yes, yep.
So Drew, you're saying, your conclusion is what?
I think it can be conditioned. I mean, there were concerns about the float size. But if it's a stylistic thing that the applicant is looking at in terms of going with a float instead of a longer ramp, it can still be conditioned that only a portion of this float is used as a dockable portion for a boat. So,
Single vessel.
a single vessel, right, right.
Now, just to be clear on the boat size, did you say that when there was a standard size we had, it was 150
50
square
square
feet?
feet, yeah.
So this original one is 180, and the new one will be 360.
Right.
But we no longer have a specific size. And then, but the other thing is, it does appear that the Division of Marine Fisheries is saying that is quahog.
Well, it says
It
adjacent.
says that the project size was adjacent to mapped shellfish habitat, but then it says subtidal waters within the project site have habitat characteristics suitable for these species.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm not really clear on whether it is quahog habitat or not. I mean, I have a lot of respect for our shellfish's warden opinion, and he did say that he does not believe that that is suitable
Right.
for quahogs.
Yeah,
So we seem to have a disagreement between
right.
our warden
I
and
would-
this agency.
I would side with Rick on this one, because I'm
Yes.
familiar with the area, I've seen it firsthand, and it's muck.
It's
It's not
nasty
even
stuff.
close to suitable quahog habitat in that area.
It's a
Adjacent
muddy,
to it is
silty
a,
substrate
it's-
that's at
it's
least
mucky,
24,
silty.
24 inches or
Right.
so. I put the survey rod into it, it just goes down
Right.
at least 24 inches.
Okay.
Yeah.
And one other question, you mentioned that this gains depth from the existing float position, but you didn't note what the depth is at the existing float position.
Yeah, so
1.9.
1.9.
Well,
there is-
that's further inland than the float looks like, and it's a new float that's 1.9
Yeah, so we're going
on the
from,
inside.
it's about the 1.9 near the end of the existing, and we're gonna be out another half a foot or so, of depth, from the end of the proposed. So I didn't put a depth on the most seaward side, but it's less than one. I mean, on the landward side, pardon me, on the landward side. So it's shallow now. We definitely want to move the boat back.
Right, I mean, so you didn't put a measurement down, but your observation is that it appears to be shallower on the
Landward
seaward
side.
side.
Landward side.
Landward side. Gotta be.
I have depths on the end of the
So
existing.
is that where he's docking now? Mooring his boat on the landward
Docking at
side?
the existing right now.
On-
And at the
on the landward side?
seaward end
Okay.
of the existing.
Yeah, put it on the plan, just so we.
I'm not sure what you mean by,
So, the dashed right there is that existing, and
Right.
he pulls up right alongside of that right
right, so
there.
what is the depth in there is what I'm asking. I mean, this is
Chaos.
inland
He's pulling
of
it
the
here.
new
It's
dock, it
close
looks
to
like,
it.
Yeah, I mean, this guy.
which is further over than the
This guy,
existing
if you
one,
look
so
at
it's
the
quite a ways from
property line,
here.
This guy is,
Practically jump from this to
Yeah.
this, it's so close.
this guy is too far over to the right. He should be over here.
I agree.
This will improve
Okay, this is, I mean, you're just,
situation for
you didn't
navigation.
measure it, but that's your observation of what it is at that point?
I don't want to be too negative about this, but, and I mean, It seems to me that the owner, I don't know why the owner's going to the expense to put in this extra dock. So I'm sure when he brings his boat in there, and as I say, he goofs the motor a little bit, if the bottom is as soft as I'm sure it is, he'd be as deep as he'll be at the end of his new dock. We're taking-
It'll be a little deeper, it will be, and most importantly, the front of the proposed dock is gonna be as deep as the back of the existing, so we are gaining,
So
we
you'll
are
be,
gaining a bit.
is the other
You're,
dock used?
the existing dock is used
No,
now.
the other dock, the
The
adjacent neighbors.
neighbors? Yes, it is.
So could
It's
it-
actually, it's that dock you see in the background, in the picture to the right. You see, it's very tight in that area.
Yeah,
That's
they
why
got a
it could be
navigation
he's
issue.
trying to get away from that dock rather than get another few
Well,
inches.
That's why we're going to relocate to the north, and then we're gonna go out. That's gonna create that greater separation there. It's a very unique shoreline configuration.
Yeah, and, you know, usually you draw a line continuing from this property line straight out into water, riparian lights kind of stuff. The dock on the left is probably too far to the right,
Oh,
but
the
we won't.
shoreline apportionment for this area would be a challenge.
Yeah, exactly. But, you know, if you follow that property line out and try.
They would all
then
converge, right?
It's gonna converge, and it's gonna be very difficult. The dock on the left is probably a little too far to the right, but this is gonna improve the situation and allow navigation of two boats in and out of their docks.
I think that's the primary advantage.
That's-
not
there's no
anything
question.
About getting 3 more inches of
Yeah,
water.
exactly.
I personally think that Rick's got a pretty good idea of what's going on out there. And if
Oh,
he says
absolutely.
it's not a-
It's a long look-see from New Bedford over to these waters. I trust Rick.
So, any other comments or questions from the audience?
You said, Matt, you were gonna add an additional pier,
Piling.
piling, I meant, and the piling would be to the right of the existing ones up there? In this photo?
So the back piling in the right photo, that itself is going to move.
Right.
And then the new piling will be in line with the existing, the relocated existing, and the new one. So they'll be moving to the right into that photograph.
How far does that piling get moved, the one that's going to be moved? Is that like a couple feet?
Yeah, the width of
The
the
only reason
dock.
I ask is you move it a couple feet, and it'll come right out again with the
Slightly less
first.
than 6 feet.
Less than 6 feet?
That might be far enough. You know, it's gonna jack right out with some ice if it comes out, goes back in where it's already been pretty disturbed from where it used to be.
When they go down into sand like that, you can pull that piling up and put it back down in the same spot, and it will get sucked in. That hole fills in very quickly as you're moving it, as you're taking it out.
You say these are vinyl coated piles?
So
The new one will
like
be,
The one will be, yeah.
yes, we don't specify any more CCA.
Yeah.
It's all vinyl coated across the board. Or equal, because these are Pearson fiberglass.
So, do we have any motion?
Can we summarize the conditions that we want to put on this before we
Sure.
approve this? Why don't you just remind us?
The conditions would be for use of the outermost seaward side of the additional float, and a condition that reflects no prop dredging from boat use in this area. So I think those were the two conditions that we.
What about the limiting it to the single vessel as is current?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Single vessel limitation?
Single vessel limitation. So single vessel.
Single powered.
If I may, can we say the outermost southern side?
Yeah.
I don't want the seaward side,
Yeah.
somebody
Yeah,
to
yeah.
interpret that.
Yeah.
Yep, okay, it's the southerly side, the ebb side of it.
Yeah.
And you're not opposed to the single vessel? Suppose if they have a dinghy tied up
Well,
someplace.
What's
Not gonna-
pictured there is bigger than a
How
dinghy.
about one single motorized?
Yeah, right.
Sounds better. Yeah, because
Okay,
so just to reiterate, one single motorized vessel, outermost southerly side, of the float, and no prop dredging.
I would move we close an issue and add these conditions.
Second?
All in favor?
Yes?
Yes,
Yes.
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 unanimous, thank you. I'll call the 6:15 hearing, Ann J. Zalinsky, 24 Menemsha Road and 0 Uncle Percy's Road. This is an NOI, proposed vista pruning, owner of record of 0 Uncle Percy's Road, Papaneset Beach Association.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, my name is J.P. Newton, I'm not the landscape, I'm representing the applicant. Like you said, the proposed work is to create and maintain for perpetuity a vista window that would affect about 25% of the length of the property, which comes up to 25 feet of property length is 100 feet. The vista pruning would be done in accordance to the Mashpee Conservation Commission protocols. And the 30%, no more than 30% of the limbs are per tree within the buffer, no more than 20% of the saplings within the corridor, and shrubs within the 5 feet. And then it would all be done prior to the removal of trees. And then nothing other than that area would be opened up for vista pruning. King's Pond is, from what research out, is not within any sort of area of critical environmental concern, and it is not considered a great pond, so it does not meet the require chapter 9.
Any comments from the audience? Drew, do you have anything for us?
So just, you saw a similar application at the last meeting for vista pruning. It was actually the house right across the street on Menemsha. Same situation where the applicant is proposing work on their property and on another property, which is Papaneset Beach Association. They own a strip of land basically around the entirety of Dean's Pond that contains a walking path and then a narrow vegetated buffer strip between the path and Dean's Pond. So as that is the case, if vista pruning is going to be through that area of another property owner, we do have a letter in the file submitted by Papaneset Beach Association authorizing vista pruning to take place in this designated area through their property. So they do have Papaneset Beach Association's authority, permission, to conduct vista pruning through their strip of property that lies between the applicant and the pond. So as stated, all vista pruning protocols will be in the order of conditions, which is standard for all vista pruning applications. So those,
So you've reviewed the actual site and where they would be doing the pruning?
yeah, and the way it works with vista pruning, it's, as you all know, it's November 1st to March 1st is the window. Sometimes you agree to extend it based on the severity of the winter. But the protocol is that when the orders get recorded and they're ready to do the work, wooden stakes get placed out in accordance with the scaled window on the plan, so we know exactly where the quarter is in the field, and then those selective pruning measures of the various percentages based on vegetative layer are discussed with the contractor on site. Trees get flagged for the 30% removal of the branches. Saplings identified up to 20% can be removed in the corridor. They get flagged ahead of time, and everything is flagged and visually shown in the field between the contractor, myself, or the assistant agent, and the homeowner, so everybody is on the same page about exactly what your corridor is and what you can continue to maintain in perpetuity. And it involves a site visit for the first 2 to 3 years of the permit, and then the maintenance and perpetuity kicks in with still a requirement of notification, but not necessarily a site visit. So that's pretty much the procedure for vista pruning.
Does this property have more than 100 feet of frontage? Or does it have 100
It
feet
has
of
100
frontage?
feet.
It's 100 feet exactly, yeah.
The 25%.
Yes. Yeah.
Any other questions, comments? Do I have a motion?
Move to close an issue in regards to the application of Ann Smudsky at 24 Menemsha Road.
All in favor?
Yes?
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 Yes.
Yes.
Unanimous, thank you. Next is the 618 NOI hearing, Garrison Development LLC, 17 Alma Road, proposed construction of a communication tower. Is there anybody here for Garrison?
No, it's, I'm sorry, it's been continued, a request for a continuance. Just give me one moment. Thank you. So, letter was submitted by BSS Design, the engineer for this project. On behalf of our client Garrison Development LLC, are we requesting a continuance of the hearing for a notice of intent, which is now scheduled for Thursday, November 12th, 2015. We therefore would like to reschedule the hearing for Thursday, December 10th, 2015.
And we received
Give a
that this
time?
afternoon?
We did receive that letter dated today, November 12th.
Do we have a time?
Audience schedule book.
6:09 is what
Oh,
it says on the
6:09,
letter.
sorry, yeah,
6:09.
6:09.
Oh, how'd they know? Well, I would move for a continuation then in regards to the application of Garrison Development LLC, 17 Alma Road, in regards to their application.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes?
Yes?
Yes.
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 And that concludes.
So we still have some.
Are there any, I know some of the folks who were here for the Garrison, Alma Road. Sir, were you here for the, just,
For that, we apologize, because I went out while the hearing was going on to try to catch people, and we sent 12 people away. So unfortunately, we crossed. You didn't get the word.
This is twofold for us. Number one, we've never been to a meeting like this, so we're learning. And number two, yeah, we were here for the hearing.
Okay,
okay, you're free to go. Oh, yes.
that's it.
Unless you want to stay longer and learn more.
Thank you.
So there's a couple of post-hearing agenda items left to discuss.
You need anything from us on the COCs?
Nope,
Nope,
no issues
they'll
with
just
the
pass them on.
COCs. They passed inspection without incident. So, the last meeting, there was some discussion, and I think at one of the previous meetings, about the process for administrative approvals. And Mark and I had sat down and gone over some ideas. I had sent out, I had contacted some fellow conservation agents in other towns on the Cape to see how they approach the administrative approval process. And it varied kind of across the board, from agent's discretion to agent and chairman approval, or agent approval and then ratification by the commission. And then as far as what qualifies for an administrative approval, it's really what I would best describe as minor activities within the buffer zone to any given resource area. So minor activities such as hazardous tree removal, a minor landscape change, say like a height in a retaining wall or extending a retaining wall X number of feet, a pathway jogging to the left as opposed to the right, pruning back of branches growing out over the roof. These are all just concrete examples of what I've seen in other towns, what they consider to be administrative approval. So, but the one thing that we had discussed is that there's nothing in the bylaw language itself, and you all have a sheet in your folders that's entitled Proposed Language Changes for Chapter 172-4. Requires approval by commission and submission for a May town meeting warrant. So the way that 172-4 is currently worded, the heading for this particular part of the bylaw is Application for Permits and Requests for Determination. And then it's broken down into sections A, B, C, D, and so on. I don't know if anyone has a copy of the regs on them, but you can take a look at the current wording. But I'll just go to that page, just so I can refer back to it. But basically, the way it's currently worded in the existing bylaw today is that Section B covers the types of permits that we would normally see for any given project. And it currently is worded, the commission may accept as the application and plans under this chapter the following, and then it gives a history of when it was amended by the State Attorney General. Number one, an administrative review level 1 application, including a request for determination of applicability, which is Form 1 under 310 CMR, the State Act 10.99, and a form as required by the rules and regulations of the commission, which is our bylaw forms. Such form will require by Massachusetts regulations, 310 CMR 10.05 3B1, notice in the local newspaper of the required hearing. The second one is notice of intent, and the supporting language for that. What I suggested and what's on this sheet of paper that you have is to tease out number one into two separate sections, so that number one just reflects an administrative review and doesn't even mention an RDA. And then it has supporting language for what's involved with an administrative request. Then number two would become submission of a request for a determination of applicability. And then a new category, number three, would be for the notice of intent. The reason is number one includes administrative review and RDA in the same paragraph.
Right.
And it just doesn't really explain the difference between the two. So if someone was to come in and read it, they'd be like, well, what's the difference? So I kind of teased that out and just made it number two and number one completely separate paragraphs, if you will. So my recommended language change, and this is, again, just for your review, you don't have to come up with a final decision tonight, you can take your time to review it, but I changed number one to administrative review, a request for administrative review, submission of a form as required by the rules and regulations of the commission for minor activities within the buffer zone to any wetland resource area as defined under chapter 172-2, which goes over all the resource areas that are protected under the act. Then I go on to explain what construes minor activities are defined as those activities that are deemed by the conservation agent, assistant agent, and/or conservation commissioners to require neither a request for determination or a notice of intent. And again, feedback is, of course, you know,
I would like to see commissioners taken out of that.
Commissioners taken out.
I think, I mean, anything that practically happens, they don't come to me or Drew or anybody. Nobody comes to us and says, hey, what about this? They come to you.
Right.
And if they,
I don't think
and
we
if they
should even
were, I'm
consider
not,
the path.
yeah, and I'm not sure if they did come to you, that
Right.
we would feel appropriate that we make a decision for
Exactly.
the commission
Right,
individually.
Didn't wanna leave you
Right,
out.
people have come to me,
Thanks,
Leave you
buddy.
out.
people have come to me, and I think it's appropriate to do as I, continue to do as I have, which is to say, talk to Drew.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right.
What our reg
That's
should
fine.
say.
I can take that out of there.
Or another example another thing you might consider, Drew, is minor activities. Is examples, are there a few safe
Well, right,
examples
that's-
that you could put in there? So that they would understand the nature and the size of a minor activity?
What
So
might-
the form that's being submitted here for the administrative review.
We need.
Yeah, this is.
Whose form is it? It's
So-
not the homeowner, is it?
No,
Oh, so-
I'll explain that. And keep in mind, the bylaw language is very general and very umbrella-like. So when you get into the details of what the form is gonna look like, which I haven't hashed out yet, I've got a bunch of different, Mark and I assembled a bunch of different examples of what various towns to use to have an administrative approval form that people actually fill out, or that the agent takes with them and checks off on site, you know, what qualifies for an administrative review. So that form has yet to be formatted. You know, I'm still kind of working on that. So this is just saying that this gives us the authority to have that form in whatever form it's going to take. And that it will be for minor activities. I can add in examples of what would be considered minor activities. But this just puts down in bylaw language that this is one of the options. And then the details on the form, I have yet to.
But the idea is, as I hear you saying it,
Yeah.
is that a homeowner has something that he wants to do. He's concerned that there may be a requirement that he doesn't know about, or,
Right.
so he goes to you or to Gateway, and he says, these are some trees hanging over my house, I'd like to get those down.
Right.
You say yes or no. If you say yes, you fill out a form and then submit it,
Right.
and it's done. I mean, there's no review of that. You don't have to bring it to the,
Well, that's.
That's
what
the
we've-
question.
That's the question
Right.
that needs to be answered.
but
is-
it's not being submitted. It's not an action that's being required of the homeowner.
Well, yes, it is.
Oh, yeah.
So in other words, the scenario would go like this. They would have like a project on site, and I take a look at it, like it's, I'll use the example of overhanging branches over the roof, or a hazardous tree, say. And I say, okay, I want to get this taken care of. What sort of permitting process, do I need to go through? And if I deem that it's not, that it's minor enough to be an administrative review, well, then this language backs that up and says this is,
But that's the point. The form is saying, here's some work that I want to have passed on as to whether or not it's minor activity.
right.
You're the one making the
I would make the
determination.
determination.
So
yeah.
the form really describes the work that's proposed
Right.
and then authorizes it by a signature or something that is from you or from Caitlin.
Right, but that's where the question lies that Mark and I were unsure of, is that acceptable to the commission to leave it up to Kate and I, or do you want it ratified in front of the commission at a public hearing?
I don't.
No.
That's what we
I mean, I'd
wanna,
sort of-
that's
so
what's
the-
open for discussion
Well,
right
we've got
now.
an RDA to do that.
What I would like, I'd like to see it passed by the chairman. It's not so much because of our current situation, but I mean, I don't know if the next agent will feel as comfortable with him doing as I do with you. It just seems, and I just wonder what happens when someone challenges this and has a concern about it. I think it'd be nice if it was at least seen by two people. I mean, of course, I really like the idea of giving you more work also, as part of my reason for suggesting this. But I just wonder if that might be an appropriate, adjustment to this procedure.
I mean, my take is that, we lean very heavily on our agent.
We do.
And we always have the ability to change what we talk about here and go back to, we'll call it a more rigorous approach that you're suggesting, if for some reason his successor isn't as easy to work with, or we do not trust the opinion as we do with Drew at this particular point in time. But then, Caitlin, no offense here, I think that you need to review recommendations that Caitlin makes, at least until Caitlin is in the same trust level that you are, with all due respect.
No, yeah, understood.
However, that doesn't cover the base of some outside individual being, expressing concern about this process. It just seems a little bit more defensible if.
I think that there's
The situation
also,
I'm concerned about is, hey, the agent said that my neighbor could do this. Now, I think that's unreasonable that now he says that I can't do this other thing over here. It's just a slightly more solid process. You're less likely to be accused of favoritism or something if you're not acting alone in this.
Right.
but
In
if
a
it's,
way,
if it's sizable, then I would, and we would depend upon the staff to figure out whether it's sizable enough. If it's not sizable enough, then I think their call is probably going to be fine. If it's sizable, then yes, there's no question. I mean, in most cases, sometimes these are time-dependent. At this particular point in time, Bob is generally speaking available, but the next time you might have a chairman who works in Boston, okay, and all of a sudden you got a tree that's dangerous, and you've got tree cutters coming.
Well, we talked about that in particular, because trees, even though they might require an RDA, at least I came away from our discussion saying an RDA, any dangerous situation like that, Drew could approve it before the fact.
Right.
And just do it. And they still may have to come for an RDA if it's not an administrative approval, if it's not an obvious tree that's way off to the side somewhere and.
So
Isn't
not,
there
not,
verbiage
not
in
a
the-
subsequent, I mean, it's either or though, right?
What?
It's administrative review, and if so, then that's it.
Right.
Yeah,
If it's an RDA, then that's the alternative.
Or
notice of
yeah.
intent, of course.
Yeah.
Or notice of intent,
Right.
right.
Isn't there language in the existing law that if it's an emergency situation, it can be handled, taken care of immediately and then reviewed afterwards?
Yes.
So I don't think that's a big
It's called an
issue.
emergency certification. So, say like after hurricanes, basically, or in preparation for hurricanes, like beach nourishment, emergency nourishment of an imminent storm approaching. Those things fall under a category called emergency certification, and there is a form for that. It's a DEP form, and that is for projects that are absolutely understood post-permitting is required. It gives them a window of time to deal with the situation. I think it's like 60 days or something like that. And some other, information needs to be included on that form about the nature of what's being done to prepare for the emergency or to address the emergency that's taken place. Septic system overflow is another perfect example of that. They can't wait 2 weeks for the next meeting, the septic system's overflowing, get out there and take care of it, and by the way, here's the emergency certification, you have to come back to the commission on this date and file an after-the-fact RDA for it, or.
But do they still have to come to you first,
They still have to come to me first, yeah.
without having the formal procedure, but still
That
they know
deals with,
you're not
we
doing
have a
something
form that
stupid.
deals with emergency situations like that. But in the case where if it's, a tree that's precariously leaning over a house and could go at any time, I would just give on-the-spot approval for that. I wouldn't even say, come in and file for something after the fact. I'd say just take care of it. And then we would follow up on our own with a post-inspection and what have you to ensure that that was the only tree to be removed. That's in an imminent hazard scenario.
It could still require a notice of intent, though, couldn't it, after the fact? I mean, what if there are two trees on the bank, the houses, like so many houses right on the bank, and these trees are leaning over, and all of a sudden, a storm comes, and they're leaning over even further?
Right. And I tend to just, I don't know, I guess it's just the scope, it really comes down to the scope of the project. Like if it's one or two trees, I don't really have any kind of threshold, I guess, that says, you're coming in for an after-the-fact permit or just a follow-up inspection.
Well, that comes to something else I was thinking about this write-up. You do specifically say activities within the buffer zone.
Yes.
I think we ought to add, any activity within a resource area requires a notice of intent or RDA. I mean, just so we cover it from both sides, because anything within a resource area ought to come before the board, I think, period.
Yeah.
Really? I mean, say you've got a tree, small tree hanging over the bank. I mean, it just doesn't seem to me that every case of something in the resource area, and what about the flood zone? Is that a resource area?
It is.
So anything in the flood zone would require an RDA or an NOI?
I would think so. I mean, that's what we're trying to protect, is all the resource areas. We
Well, I
go to
think we're
great lengths
trying
to looking at the buffer areas, and the buffer areas in our law get protected, but in the Massachusetts law, they only get protected insofar as anything there would affect the resource area, because the resource area is really the thing we're looking after here.
But in my mind, this is a kind of a fast-track process that says we have competent environmental professionals, the agent and the assistant agent. They should be able to look at a situation, determine that it's minor, as defined in our regulation, and decide that with their signature, that the work can go forward. Now, if we want to say it will be reviewed first by the commission, I think we've slowed down the train quite a bit.
Yeah, right.
But we could do that, and, I'm in favor of the delegation, the ease of process, and if we find that it's getting abused and neighbors are up in arms about it or something, then we can always relook at it.
Well, I think you bring up a valid point, which is, in my mind, activities on the bank are of a different nature than activities within the flood zone or velocity zone.
Sure.
I mean, I think activities on the bank are serious activities, and they could lead to all sorts of unforeseen results.
What you could do, another thought is, there's a difference between wetland resource areas and wetlands. Wetland resource areas are things like coastal banks, coastal dunes, inland bank, flood zone, And then you've got wetlands, which are bordering vegetated wetlands, salt marsh, bog, rivers, that are actually physically, characteristically wetlands, not wetland resource areas. There is a difference between the two. So for your comment, Mark, about activities taking place directly in a wetland, which you really wouldn't see much anything as far as development, because that would just never be allowed anyway. Those types of activities should most definitely be an RDA or a notice of intent without question.
Yeah.
Because you're not really gonna encounter a hazardous situation directly in a wetland that's gonna affect a home, or very rarely, because there's gonna be some degree of separation there between the
Even
developed
hazardous,
area
I
and the
mean, any
wetland itself.
situation, I mean, hazardous, I sort of put in the other category, say, you deal with it if it's hazardous,
Right.
and after the fact, if we have to look at it, we will.
Right.
But let them go right away, but I'm
Let
more
me
concerned about.
bring up another example just to get your opinions on, because it's something I wanted to, see what you guys thought about. Like this past winter, we had a lot of docks get popped up out of the water. And because of the sheer number of them, I felt it would be an unnecessary burden on the commission to keep saying, yeah, put it back in place, put it back in place, put it back in place, So we came up with a form. And we got just on record whose dock was being, was popped out of the water. And then we scheduled site visits to each and every property, just to go over to make sure that we're all on the same page. This dock is going back where it used to be. You're not adding anything to it, you're not extending it, you're not doing anything different to the footprint, and it's understood the dock is going back into the water the way it was, or the piles are being set back in that were popped out. We did that, we came up with just a quick form so we could track everything. But do you think that that's a good example of something like that, where it's in a resource area, obviously land under ocean?
Well, now, in that case, didn't you bring that before the board and get some kind of, get our sense of how you should handle it? I'm
Each and
just
every dock?
vaguely remembering
I
it.
think that's
Not each and
excessive.
every dog.
Yeah, I
No,
did.
just as a blanket.
Oh,
You
I
said,
did.
yeah, I want to go ahead and do
I
these.
did,
and we
I
said-
did present that to you
Yeah,
guys.
it was discussed.
And it was discussed.
I mean, it may have just flown by us in some ways, but, when the
No,
situation
I
was
didn't do it
developing.
without your,
Right.
knowing that this was gonna be our approach. And you agreed at the time that it would just be an unnecessary burden on the commission to
So
review
one possible
everything.
way to handle this would be to, say, except in wetlands, other than with the express approval of the board. I mean, now, but it's kind of an unusual case, maybe it isn't even worth handling.
Right.
Or with the concurrence of the chairman, just something a little bit more, so that normally the wetland would never be handled that way,
Right.
but there could be an exception.
And you know what, and Mark would agree with this, that a lot of these other towns do that just with the agent and the chairman, not the commission as a whole. It gets ratified by the chairman through an office visit, or something like that. Or, and that is an opportunity to say, well, wait a minute, I don't feel comfortable ratifying this, let's bring it before the commission. But that's the other step, instead of just leaving it solely up to the agent. It gets not in front of the commission at a meeting, but
Right.
the chairman comes into the office and, once a week, and then says the agent, if they have any administrative approval, say, here, this is what I've administratively approved this week, what do you think?
Yeah, or it could just be in the extreme case of the wetlands that we use that process.
Right.
The way in which I see it is that, you're like a traffic cop, you're kind of a logic diagram. They get to you, and you make the determination as to
Right.
whether it's gonna go to the RDA or to an NOI, depending upon what you see in a quick scan of what is being requested. You're the traffic cop, you direct it to go in one of these places, and if it fits into a gray area, then you probably have to call the chairman and say, this one I'm gonna hold for a little while. Together, we'll make the determination as to whether it's gonna go to the RDA flow, or whether it's gonna go to the NOI.
But what about the-
he's the traffic cop that determines where this request is coming.
But he also has the third possibility of administrative review.
Right, I mean, it
Well,
may
that's what
stop there,
that's what he's
that's what I'm
talking
saying. The application comes in, I mean, some of these, people know, they gotta go to the NOI, and they gotta go to the
Yeah,
RDA. But
it's-
if they're confused, or it's sent small, they come to Drew's the traffic cop, he kinda says, okay, let me scan it, and I read it over quickly, and based upon what I'm reading, this is a nit. I don't wanna bother anybody here, I'll take it from here and
Right.
sign off on it. This one, it's a little bit tricky here, because
I think
it's
we're
in a
saying the same
wetlands.
thing.
I'm gonna
Yeah,
talk to
you
the
are.
chairman.
We're
You're
saying the same thing.
thing, yeah.
But
You
Well,
think?
do you have enough to take, did you want, I thought you were gonna take this back and tweak it a little bit, or?
Well, yeah, I wanted you guys to just kind of absorb it, for the purpose, and discuss, kind of hash it out while we're all here together, for your input, and, just kind of tweak it as we go until we get a final consensus on the wording.
How would you guys think about having Drew put copies of these administrative reviews in our mailboxes? So if anybody cares to look at them, this is it. We're not gonna talk about it in the meeting. I mean, Drew's approved it, but just so people get an idea of what sort of things are going through an administrative review, what sort of things are happening
Sure,
that never comes before the commission.
yeah.
absolutely,
I
absolutely.
mean, it's.
Electronically,
it's-
in my case, but
Electronically is fine, any way to, just to get it,
I think that makes sense.
especially with
What
the
I
form.
what I just wanna get, and, we can get into protocol and what the form is gonna look like at another time, but as far as adding this language to the bylaw, so that, I think there was a comment about, if neighbors make a stink about, hey, why'd you use this approval process for that, and, you use this approval process for me, it's just good to have this language
Yep.
set in stone, in the bylaw, so I can go back and say, look, this is a viable option, there it is in the bylaw, 172-4, section 3. It
Right.
says it right there. And again, this is very non-specific umbrella language, which is all it needs to be for the bylaw. Then regulatory, you can go in and get into more details, or the form itself can have more details, but this is just to get it into the bylaw so we can refer back to it
Absolutely.
for legal purposes.
Do we have a sense of the commission as to whether or not all that's needed is approval by the agent? Or do we need some type of additional checkoff from the commission, the chairman? I strongly feel that let it stop there. We can put them in the mailbox. We can see what's being approved by Drew. If we're uncomfortable with that, then we can have a conversation.
I agree. I mean, based on our research, it seems to be a pretty informal process like that in a lot of towns. That's kind of the way it's handled, so.
and if we get
Is
to
there gonna
see it
be-
after the
so-
fact, then we can, if we,
So what is the consensus about wetlands?
Whether,
Whether they'll be handled the same way as everything else, or,
Yeah,
Drew makes the determination as
Yeah.
to, if it's wetlands and
Yeah,
it's
I mean, we can-
significant, then it's,
we can just make that determination. I mean, believe me, if we come across some sort of request that the applicant maybe consider minor, and it's happening directly in a wetland, I think it would be easy for us to make that determination as far as we'll go ahead and approve it, or we feel it needs to come before the commission. I think that discussion,
okay?
but the idea is that the applicant can, well, the homeowner can come in, describe what he wants to do. You maybe have to go take a site visit, or maybe you don't.
right,
And then he gets an approval. He gets a go-ahead, and you fill out a form and you put it in the file to document what you
Yeah.
approved.
Yep.
But that's it.
that's it.
that's it.
Sounds good.
And though, the last thing is that whatever is been determined that goes into the file will be also made known to the commission,
Right.
so that we can review them, so that
And eventually
over
we can
time,
ask
we
an
can
idea of the
determine
flow.
whether we like his
Yeah, yeah,
decisions.
right.
Which ones are.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, we can then
That
review
would
those.
provide feedback opportunity, so.
So there's-
One other question, I think, it sounds like we have a consensus there, but on the matter of of an assistant agent also having that authority. I mean, it occurs to me that one way to handle that is, after all, you're the assistant agent's boss, and you could, tell her that she's clear to do that or not, as you think best.
Sure,
But I was just wondering if anybody feels that should be limited further, or,
Well, you could say the agent and the assistant agent as delegated.
As delegated,
As
yeah.
delegated, sure.
In other words,
Sure,
you may say, if it's hazardous trees, no problem. You make, you know what you're doing. If
Right.
it's getting into the wetlands area, come talk to me first.
And
Sounds good.
As far as the hazardous tree removal, usually being an RDA, would there be a way that says like an imminent danger tree versus, the ones that they were proposing just this evening where,
Right.
Eventually it was more likely than not in the near future, it will cause a problem, but would that be something in the language too that should be imminent versus?
probably doesn't need to be.
I don't think it needs to be, because that can be just our discretion.
That's
Okay.
I
judgment.
mean, it's a judgment call, and based on my experience with that kind of scenario, it can be, really obvious what defines imminent versus it can wait for a hearing, or it can wait for an administrative review process. Or I could say, that tree needs to go like today.
Right.
Get the crew out here. Particularly if it's, if it's a situation where you're looking at a serious imminent hazard tree and there's a hurricane coming in the next day.
Right.
Just go ahead and take care of what you need to take care of, because it's gonna end up a disaster if you don't do it immediately. So, I mean, those are the kind of things that you use to make that determination. But I think it's a discretion thing. It should be left as a discretion thing with the agent.
All right, so.
Sounds good.
I think we have consensus, is that?
I think so.
Well, yeah, I just, I think I would just ask that you take a look at the wording, you can take your time with the wording, and at the next meeting, we can formally submit a change to the bylaw.
Well, no, we have discussed some minor changes to it. Do you want to reissue this?
Yeah, I was
reversion.
thinking that
Right.
if you take any input you've received tonight, and then,
Right.
the commented things, if they should be in the write-up, put them into the write-up.
So we're eliminating conservation commissioners from the wording.
Right.
Implementing examples of what are construed as minor
Yes.
activities, just
Yep.
2 or 3 examples, or 3 or 4 examples. And adding the phrase "as delegated" with assistant, to the
Yes.
assistant agent.
Yes.
So those are
That's
the 3
Yeah, I think
changes to
so.
the wording. And then I can come back and, at the next meeting with the finalized wording, and if there's any further tweaking that needs to be done. We have plenty of time before the warrants need to be submitted for May 5th town meeting, so it's
Great.
not like we're up against the gun. Good.
Okay. So that's it on administrative approval. Do we have?
Yep.
Well, I'm sorry, I have a little add or two.
No, sure. Go
We have,
ahead.
we have
Which I think
paperwork.
I want to draw to all of our attention, and we can chat a few minutes about what to do about it.
Sure.
We had tonight numerous applications on somebody wanting to take some trees down. Either they're dangerous, or they're dead, or who knows why. And we typically say, do it. And I believe that's the kind of activity which should require some mitigation. In other words, we're losing, whenever this happens, we're losing a lot of wildlife habitat. And I think trees ought to be replanted, or something ought to be replanted to try to make up for that. It's so easy, as most of you know, to get somebody to come in and say, yeah, that tree's got pitch pine beetles, or whatever the hell they are. Because all pines do.
The little buggers.
And therefore, they've got to go out. But just taking it out is not the answer from a conservation point of view. Taking it out and replacing it is the answer.
How often
Somewhat.
do they ever cut down to a level where, say, if they were to fall, I mean, I guess that would make them even less likely to fall because they're more stable being short or whatever, but
Right.
is there any cases, I mean, even if it is already a standing dead wood but too tall, could that ever be where you just, we'll cut it to 10 feet tall instead?
Yeah.
So you can sign
You
up.
could certainly eliminate the hazard by turning the tree into a snag.
Or
as
short
opposed to
snag.
outright removal.
Somehow, I
You're
don't
gonna
know
get a
that
lot
that's.
of negative
Yeah, you're
feedback
gonna
on
get
that
a
because people
lot.
don't like the way they look. But I agree with Mark, and we talked about this as well, about the, because it's probably the single most common permit request that you guys see, is hazardous tree removal. And it's understood, because in areas like New Seabury, they were harmless saplings 20, 30 years ago, and now they're these large, cumbersome,
Right.
But in many
hazardous
cases,
trees, so.
Funny.
The question I have is, right now, when you read our mitigation regulation, it gives guiding language that, a 12-inch caliper tree shall be replanted, the loss of a 12-inch caliper tree shall have 6 2-inch caliper saplings to replace it. So I guess the thing that we would need to do is to come up with some sort of calculated formula that spits out a square footage of mitigation based on a tree size instead of just saplings only. Because sometimes sites don't lend themselves to multiple having trees grow, because of site conditions, it's a small lot, no matter where you plant a tree, it's gonna be close to the house, you're gonna see that situation come again in 20, 30 years or whatever. But to have some kind of, and again, I can ask around, what do other commissions consider to be mitigation or correlation of mitigation for the loss of a given size tree? because you don't want to be random about it. You don't want to just say, well, you throw in 3 or 4 bayberry and a couple of inkberry and call it a day. You know, you want to have specific guiding
I
language.
think that's tricky.
that
I
says-
think you can't be pro forma. You can't, just like you said, if you take out a 12-inch tree, you can't require 6 2-inch saplings,
Right.
because depending upon the property, that may or may not be
May not even
appropriate.
be- Right, exactly.
So, I think it'd be great if you could ask around and see what other commissions do. I
See
think
what kind of-
something ought to be done.
There's got to
I'm
be some kind of formula out there to.
just concerned about how to do it without getting a landscape architect in there who comes in and says,
Or what Caitlin just said, it's discretionary mitigation. You could just do it on a case-by-case
yeah,
basis.
that's,
and-
I think what we'll have to
Say,
do, because
yeah.
some sites can put up a few trees, and some probably can't tolerate having any more trees. They're already
Right.
so overgrown that,
Right,
We had cases tonight, I mean, of both very sorts. There was this one lot where it's an empty lot, and the guy wants a couple of trees that are so big that they can reach all the way back to the house.
right.
Right, now, I mean, there, you could put a few saplings
Yeah,
around to
you
replace
could,
it.
yeah,
And it would be 50 or 60 years before they were a hazard at
sure,
least.
sure.
On the other hand, we commonly, and it happened tonight, have a tree that's right next to a house where the tree should never have been planted or allowed to grow in the first place.
you don't want to put
And
one
in those
back.
cases, you don't want to put a tree anywhere near the house. I mean, that's,
Right, exactly, yeah.
But the vista pruning in
So
That's why it has to be
perpetuity
very
at Dean's
discretionary. You
Pond,
really have to,
Is it-
site-specific.
the vista pruning in perpetuity, they were taking down a couple of trees, wasn't it?
20%.
20% of saplings.
Right,
It
saplings
was only
only.
saplings, not
Saplings,
trees.
not
Right.
trees, yeah.
Okay, but there was no plantings that was gonna occur
No.
in that regard. I thought if you do that, then you had to replace
Well,
something.
vista pruning, I mean, that was heavily researched. You can go back and look at the regulation. Diane Burritos, the former assistant agent, did a lot of research into vista pruning, and that's where they came out with these calculated percentages of vegetation removal, and that it would not be a detriment to wildlife as long as you adhere to these pruning standards. That, you know, it would not adversely affect wildlife habitat by having selective pruning standards put in place. That was a very calculated, well-thought-out regulation that I happen to agree with today. If it's done right, it works out beautiful for both sides. It really does. But in the case of hazardous trees, where we're just seeing more and more applications of these, I think that, you know, number one, identifying areas where mitigation will be most beneficial on the property, and then trying to figure out, well, what sort of calculation or correlation can we use to go back to say, okay, you take out X number of trees with this size caliper, that requires X number of square footage of mitigation in an area of the commission's discretion on the lot. And that's, and the bottom line is you're losing vegetation left and right.
Right.
And it's not, I'm not saying it's for an invalid reason, but you're losing vegetation nonetheless.
But you're in a residential area that's developed over 50 years,
Right.
and there's a lot of excess wildlife, I mean,
Growth.
growth.
Oh, that's right. I mean,
And,
some-
and it, you know, I can understand saying mitigation, you know, as appropriate, where it could be done in a, you know, a suitable area, but, you know, if you take down 6 12-inch, you know, pines from the front yard, you know, you're not gonna wanna put a sapling farm in the front yard.
Right.
No, no.
That's what he was talking about.
That's why I was saying where it's most
That's
beneficial.
obviously not the,
It's not, it serves no purpose for that. And it's not really just for wildlife, too. I mean, you consider, you know, the landscape of New Seabury, where you do have a lot of high-maintenance lawns going up to the water, a lack of native vegetation. You know, it doesn't always, it's not just single serving for wildlife or wildlife habitat benefit, it's also nutrient uptake and mitigating for high-maintenance lawns where it require a lot of fertilizer.
Why don't we require mitigation when we do a tear down, you know, a tear down and you clear cutting of a lot?
Oh, you do.
We
Oh,
do,
you do, very heavily.
we
so.
do,
Oh, absolutely.
yeah.
That is a first thing that is, it appears that the applicant, not the applicant's agent
Right.
points out that, you know, we've done this, we've
They
disturbed X number of
They go by the
things.
calculation chart and they
pull
provide
that out.
what's, yeah.
You see these,
I don't know, I've looked at a lot of new homes, and
but, I mean, that's
you know,
what,
you see, maybe you see a bordering vegetated wetland garden with, you know, small little plants, shrubs, but there was numerous large trees on the lot before it was
But
cleared.
here's mitigation, and you removed an oak tree, and so therefore they've calculated by removing that oak tree, this is the mitigation that needs to happen.
I understand what you're saying.
Invasive removal too,
Hmm?
potentially as mitigation.
Oh, absolutely.
True, I'd just like to bring up something, just a week ago, there's a tree company that came down the street, and they just cut huge branches right and left off of a lot of trees, and it was either ARC or the town of Mashpee for the plowing
Don't worry, it was not
purpose.
the town of Mashpee. I think you'll find it's your homeowners association so that the roads would get plowed.
Well, yeah, that's what I was gonna say, so they'd be plowed, but I think they go overboard. They really do, I mean, they decimated some of these trees, I mean,
That stuff way the hell up.
yeah, I mean,
Oh, truck,
It's
whatever.
gotta,
And
it's
it's-
gotta be 12 feet up.
Right.
It's gotta be 12 feet up, but otherwise they won't
then
plow
I
it.
could see some limbs that were overhanging the lines, the electrical lines. They didn't bother to do those, but on the sides of the road, I mean, a lot of these trees are basically deformed, and they're gonna end up dying because of the excessive cutting they did.
Right.
And that's what annoys me when I see things like that.
But, you know, all due respect, that's, I think, a separate issue. The process for getting those, what we're looking at is on the, you know, the hazardous tree situation.
Well, but I'm
Or
saying,
within,
there are gonna be hazardous trees all over the place if they go,
Yeah, but those trees are being cut not because they're hazardous to the house or, but to the
No.
wires.
well,
But it's not
and
even the
for
wires,
plowing,
it's to
for
keep
plowing.
that 12, the umbrella, or whatever you wanna call it, up to 12 feet. They gotta keep it up 12 feet, otherwise
Well, if
the
you bring a large
DPW
truck-
won't plow
Yeah.
the trees. I mean, the roads.
Okay, well, this is running, this discussion is running a little long. Do we want to continue to keep talking about this, or?
Yeah,
Well,
I
Drew's
think
gonna
so.
Fix it up a little bit.
I think we ought to continue, I'm not sure we need to continue talking now. I think you were gonna get some information from other commissions on how
Yes.
they dealt with this issue.
How they
I
deal
think
with
that
the
would help
issue.
us a lot.
Yeah.
And some changes to the wording, and then we'll talk about it again.
And of course, the nasty thing is going to let all these consultants and tree people know what's going on.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're gonna come in and say, well, we're gonna lap down trees, so they got fine pine bark beetle, and you come in and say, great, you can do that, but you're gonna have to plant 2 more saplings and put a field over here of high bush blueberries, and
Right, yeah. Yeah,
that'll be the tricky thing, is getting people to know that it's somewhat of a turn in direction.
right.
But,
And the thing
you know, again,
I,
I just, that sounds like being arbitrary and heavy-handed to homeowners who have trees that have grown over the last 50 years. They are now diseased. They're just trying to live in their house in a safe
right,
manner. Yet they're being told, now we have to do all of this mitigation planning.
That's why we have
that's
to,
why I've kind of hesitated to.
I don't
approach
like
the
it
subject.
myself. I think it's like, it feels like.
Well,
big- big
you're,
brother.
and you're right, it's already a burden to have the tree removed, it's a cost.
Exactly.
It's an inconvenience, and this could be construed as really piling on to that. But the other, I guess the flip side is that, I mean, in some of these hazardous situations, it can be a bit of a stretch. It's a maybe this is a hazard sort of situation, instead of like, yeah, that's definitely a hazard. But at the same time, you know, you can't argue that if it did fall, yeah, it would hit the house. So I guess it's kind of a discretionary thing there where, you know, what's considered, you know, acceptable hazard without mitigation and hazard tree removal that should trigger mitigation. Is there a line there that, you know?
that's
you
what I was
cross
concerned
that-
about. It
and I-
might require
Yeah,
naturals to look at the lot and
The basic
say,
situation is that if you're living near a resource area and the commission needs to pass on things you do on your lot, it's an imposition and it's an expense.
Right.
That's just the way it is. The removal of trees is a one-way process. The person has got their lot all cleared out pretty much, so no new trees are coming up, there are no little saplings to replace. The trees are gonna mature, they're gonna become infirm, they're gonna die. And then pretty soon you have nothing anymore. It makes sense to me that just part of the normal maintenance, that an unfortunate expense, believe me, it's certainly, I'm not happy with it. It's just, but it's the way it is. If the law, if the state and the town are gonna require that people who live near resource areas spend additional money to protect those areas,
Right.
then this is just part of it. You pull all the trees off your lot, they need to have something go in behind them.
Right.
And in fact, if it's an area where saplings look appropriate, nowhere near the house,
Right,
then that is, in fact, should be the go-to.
right.
Because the natural process is to have young trees coming up, older trees coming down. All we're doing here, all we'd like to do probably, if we really thought about what would be best for the, for the aims of the Conservation Commission, would be to have every tree that had to come down laid down on the ground. So it was more like would actually happen in a normal succession. That's impossible.
Right, exactly.
That's absolutely impossible.
But Dale, what
But
I'm
I-
afraid of is that what you're arguing for is a set of requirements that basically is gonna say, if there's a major new construction or renovation project on a lot,
Mhm.
that you're going to have to maintain as close as possible the existing wooded condition of that lot. And therefore, you're not gonna be able to do the new, more decorative, whatever the right words are, that, landscaping type of landscaping that people, are interested in
If you're within
having
a certain
when they're
distance.
spending lots of money for a new home.
I'm not allowed to put, I don't know, English roses down near my beach. I mean, I'm not. And maybe that's what someone who owns my lot someday will want to do, but it's illegal.
All right,
That's the way it is. I'm not suggesting that we get draconian, but then also in the question of the expense. Now, maybe I got cheated, but I had about a 70-foot pitch pine that decided it wanted to sort of go this way, and it was going to take out other trees and power line and maybe my neighbor's car potentially, so he and I got together and we had it taken down. It cost well over $1,000. If we'd been required to put in a few bushes or a couple of saplings, we would hardly have noticed the additional expense. I mean, this business of taking a tree out,
There's a guy who has a sign up, I'll cut down any tree for $50.
he's not going to be able to pay for the fuel to chip a tree this size for $50, so I don't
Right.
think that's going to happen.
Well, I'll look into this more and
There's obviously an
Come up
issue
with
of
some
of
possible ideas
appropriate
about how we
scale
can-
of mitigation,
how
which
we
we have to
can
worry
strike
about.
some middle ground here and figure out a solution. Just real quick, because I know it's getting late and you don't want to stay here much longer, but I would ask that everybody take a look at Regulation 30. This is the other thing that Mark and I looked at. It's the regulation is entitled Prevention of Pollution, the Effect of Nutrient Loading on Water Bodies. Please take time to read this regulation, because when Mark and I were discussing this, we feel initially that it's not, the performance standards are not easy to apply. It's not a realistic regulation, and you'll understand when you read it, as you read through it, that it's very difficult to apply in reality. It's about lowering overall nitrogen and phosphorus input based on development, impervious surfaces, septic systems, stormwater runoff, everything, all encompassing on a lot. And then there's a nitrogen calculation sheet that goes along with it. It's something we haven't been applying to projects, but the reason is because it's just not very feasible. And Mark, I
I'll
don't know
just
if you want
say,
to add
we've
something
never
to that.
applied it. In fact, it is physically impossible to apply.
Right,
There's no septic system that will meet this requirement, no IA system that will meet this requirement. The only thing that might meet this requirement is a City of Boston wastewater treatment plant. A huge wastewater treatment plant
Yeah.
might come close to meeting these requirements, but nothing else could do it.
but take a look at the regulation.
Heaven knows why it's here or where it
Be
came
prepared
from.
to discuss it, because it's something that, it's in our regs, and right now, as Mark said, it's impossible to apply the performance standards as they're currently worded.
This is
Talking
regu-
about getting down to a 5 parts per million nitrogen loading, including the septic system, that's not happening.
So this Regulation 30 is located where?
This is in your regs, it's regulation number 30. It's called the effects of.
blue binder.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, in the enabling regulations. But, yeah, read it through and just be prepared to, discuss it, because it's there, it's, so that means it's part of our purview to include it, but you'll understand when you start reading it how unrealistic it really is.
I'll ask the question, but I don't want an answer at this point. We can talk about it. We should understand what the correlation or the impact of this requirement is to what's going on with the comprehensive plan and all of the,
Which requirement?
the nitrogen removal.
Oh, yeah, I'm on the sewer commission, I know very well what the comprehensive.
Okay, well, you could
comprehensive plan. We could
educate
talk
us.
about that, yeah.
That would be appreciated.
Sure.
So Drew, do we have anything else for the,
I think that pretty much wraps it up.
well, I have one quick thing I wanted to, do I need, we need a vote or anything else?
No, I don't think so.
I mean, I just wanted to inform the commission that I've decided that while as much as I enjoyed in the close to a year of being on the commission as chairman, that I'm going to, as soon as feasible, step back and just revert to my position as a member of the commission. So I encourage us to be looking for a replacement to the open member slot that we have, and think about who we could come up with as chairman.
Okay, and you know, we might also want to revisit this idea that we discussed a little bit last time of putting some kind of making it mandatory that we re-elect once a
Term
year.
limits.
Yeah, term limits.
Well,
Came up also.
I mean, you shouldn't have to ask us to let you go, you know?
The
It makes
town
a lot of
regulations
sense.
basically state you revisit officers every year
Yeah,
and
it's
re-elect
a
officers
yearly-
every year. We
yearly
just
thing.
never did
We
when
have.
Jack
Well,
was
then-
here.
So when is
So-
that gonna be?
Well, I guess is it municipal year or is it calendar year?
I think it's
Would-
calendar year.
I think it's calendar year. We just never did it when Jack was, I mean, it never came up. Jack never
So
brought
what
it
we
up, so
probably
we never
should
talked
do
about it.
is have it on the agenda for a meeting sometime soon, or an election.
I don't mean to say that. I'd love to say that to Jackson.
Okay, well, on that note, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move you adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes,
Aye.
yes,
Yes.
yes.
Thank you.